Hi Year 13, so again I'm going to record our lesson from the poetry anthology, this time on to my 9-year-old self, and hopefully this will help Paul with revision. So straight on to the poem. Okay, we completed this activity in class where I asked you to sort of consider your own sort of experience of being a young child, a 9-year-old, and then we went straight on to having a little look at the poem. So I'll do what I usually do, I'll read through it. You've got the questions that we went through there in class, so if you missed it, they're there for you to have a go at now. If you were there, obviously you've already got your notes on this, you can look back on those. Okay, so I'll go through reading it as I said, and then we'll break it down stanza by stanza. To my 9-year-old self. You must forgive me. Don't look so surprised, perplexed, and eager to be gone, balancing on your hands or on the tightrope. You would rather run than walk, rather than climb than run, rather leap from a height than anything. I have spoiled this body we once shared. Look at the scars and watch the way I move, careful of a bad back or a bruised foot. Do you remember how 3 minutes after waking, we jumped straight out of the ground floor window into the summer morning? That dream we had, no doubt it's as fresh in your mind as the white paper to write it on. We made a start, but something else came up, a baby vole, or a bag of sherbet lemons. And besides, that summer of ambition created an iced lolly factory, a wasp trap, and a den by the cesspit. I'd like to say we could still be friends, but the truth is we have nothing in common, beyond a few shared years. I won't keep you then. Time to pick rose hips for twopence a pound, time to hide down scared lanes from men in cars after girl children, or to lunge out over the water on a rope that swings from the tree. Long buried in housing. But no, I shan't cloud your morning. God knows I have fears enough for us both. I leave you in an ecstasy of concentration, slowly peeling a ripe scab from your knee to taste it on your tongue. Alright, looking through it then and analysing it stanza by stanza. So to begin with, I mean that opening, it's a dramatic monologue, and obviously the speaker is addressing herself as her younger self, to her younger self, as the title sort of clearly indicates as well, that she is addressing her past, she's addressing her younger self. So the opening then, it's quite authoritative. We've got quite a formal but tentative opening as well there, and that sort of modal verb, suggesting a sort of urgency to what she wants to say. You must forgive me. Again, like I said, that authority. The caesura there as well, imitating maybe the distance between the speaker and her 9-year-old self. And there's actually quite a few bits and examples of caesura, and that can indicate maybe a hesitancy or maybe an urgency even, depending on which way you look at it. Don't look so surprised. So again, that sort of imperative which she opens with as well. It's very kind of authoritarian. Don't look so surprised, perplexed and eager to be gone. And each of those sort of verbs, surprised, perplexed, eager, are very kind of reflective of childhood and sort of revealing that she knows herself, she understands herself, she understands how she was when she was a child. Maybe a frustration as well, an impatience in the speaker. The child clearly wants to go, the child clearly doesn't want to be there. Balancing on your hands or on the tightrope. So this idea as well, these verbs are very active verbs, balancing on your hands on the tightrope. You'd rather run than walk, rather climb than run. So again, we've got this sort of energetic line almost that's imitating the child's maybe frustration as well in wanting to be gone and not really wanting to be standing there listening. There's an instruction there as well not to be so shocked or eager to go. That sort of conflicts with the actions and the energy of the child. And there's a parallelism as well in the structure of these lines. And again, showing that maybe eagerness for activity. You'd rather run than walk, rather climb than run. So maybe it's that eagerness, that excitement of childhood that's being sort of shown there, and I've put along there. You can see exuberance and excitement of youth. Rather leap from a height than anything. So that, again, that sort of desire for maybe unbound energy and freedom that she has as a child. And maybe there as well, metaphorically, could symbolise that fall from childhood into adulthood as well in that opening stanza. On to the next stanza then. So, I have spoiled this body we once shared. There is a sort of emphasis, personal pronoun I, suggesting that it's the adult form that's sort of resulted in the body that they have now as an adult. I have spoiled the body we once shared. And there's connotations there maybe of food, that idea of sort of once being sort of fresh and being young, and then obviously spoiling as it grows up, corruption maybe as well, that innocence being lost as they've grown up, that we once shared. So it's interesting that although there's a solidarity in what she's saying there, that collective pronoun we suggesting a togetherness, actually there's also a distance between them, and even with the pronouns, the fact they're separated so much in the sentence, suggesting that there's a distance between who she once was and who she is now. Look at the scars. So again, very imperative in the tone. Look at the scars and watch the way I move. So that those scars suggesting experience, having connotations there, I suppose, of the pain and suffering that she's endured as she's grown up and as she's grown older, as she's become this adult that she's speaking as now. Careful of a bad back or a bruised foot. So we've got some alliteration here as well, maybe suggesting and sort of linking to that damage that she's done through that sort of, I suppose, more forceful plosives that are being used. So it's emphasising that damage, how worn her body is now as well. Watch the way, so wants to maybe maintain the interest as well of the child that she's speaking to. Again, sort of emphasised by the alliteration. I move careful of a bad back or bruised foot. And I suppose these actions are very much in antithesis of the actions of her as a child, the idea of running and walking, climbing and leaping. And that sort of semantic field there as well of kind of ill health as she's grown older. Do you remember how the 3 minutes after waking we jumped straight out of the ground floor window? So again, that idea of movement and energy, that idea of jumping as well and leaping into things, maybe suggesting that impulsiveness of youth. And the interesting idea then as well, the ground floor window, so not maybe quite into adulthood, the window maybe representing that idea that she's getting closer to adulthood, but she's not quite there yet because she's not making mention of a door, but actually the window. Into the summer morning, so summer, that may be suggesting the height of her life, but then morning, beginning, maybe a beginning, representing a beginning and linked to youth as well. But that rhetorical question as well, maybe to hook in the attention of her as a young child. On to the next stanza then. So that dream we had, so again we've got this sort of, there's an interesting use throughout really the poem of personal pronouns, to sometimes unite the speaker and her younger self, and then at other points to sort of distance her and her younger self and show that kind of distance between them, really, that sort of growth of time between them. That dream we had, no doubt it's fresh in your mind. So it's something that's new to the child and still there for the child, but obviously it's gone and it's sort of past for the speaker, for the older person. As the white paper to write on. So interesting again of that colour imagery, and maybe, you know, representing the innocence, that new beginning that the child has, that the speaker has lost. That dream as well, that is interesting because it's quite ambiguous. It doesn't sort of specify what the dream was. So you could say that again it sort of suggests a unity between the two of them, because there's a conspiracy almost in terms of they both know what's being referred to, but as outside readers we don't, and we're sort of aware then of the similarity between the speaker and the listener. to write it on. We made a start, but something else came up. So again, we've got that idea of new beginnings and starting things, and we've got the use of the collective pronoun we, so again, that unity between the two. But something else came up, and here we've got now this sort of hyphen emphasises a lot of caesura being used throughout this part of the stanza. And again, maybe showing this idea of how much her youth was sort of filled with activity and energy, and maybe the idea as well of short attention span when she's young, so jumping from one thing to another. A baby vole or a bag of sherbet lemons, so things that would interest a child, and those distractions. And besides that, summer of ambition created an ice lolly factory. So again, that idea of innocence of childhood and all those different things that a child would be interested in that may not well interest an adult. A wasp trap and a den by the cesspit. So that idea maybe as well bringing up very specific nostalgia for the speaker, and something that's obviously fresh in the memory of the child that she's speaking to. And again, sort of closing that gap between them then, that this is a shared history that they both have. On to the next one. I like to say that we could be friends. So again, there's interesting use of the personal pronouns. So she emphasises herself at the start, and then refers to the collective pronoun of we. However, that sort of conjunction, coordinating conjunction, suggests that that's not a reality, that they're not united, that they are very different now. The truth is, we have nothing in common beyond a few shared years. Could it be then, particularly this keyword few, is it maybe suggesting, and that being the quantifier there, suggesting that it's very brief in terms of, for the person speaking, it feels like that happened so quickly that it is brief, a few short years. It could suggest as well that the speaker has changed and matured so much that she doesn't feel that she has now anything in common with that child, despite the fact that that child was her. I won't keep you then. So that may be a regret that she can't take, you can't take your youth forward. I won't keep you, I'm going to let you go and enjoy that, because that's something I no longer have, so I'm not going to sort of distract you from it anymore. But that sort of short imperative, declarative, sentence there in that line, maybe being quite wistful, being quite sort of regretful then in that line, the tone. I won't keep you then. And again, we've got that interesting use of caesura. Time to pick rose hips for twopence a pound. Time to hide down scared lanes. That repetition of time, clearly that's significant and important for the speaker. Maybe the emphasis on how quickly time has passed. Maybe how much time has separated them from the fact that she was this exuberant, youthful child that was constantly distracted and had a head full of dreams, and that she's no longer that person. But clearly time is important there. Again, we've got action here, pick, hide, so there's verbs, but quite colloquial here as well, maybe quite archaic use of language, a twopence being very old money. Pick rose hips for twopence a pound. Time to hide down scared lanes. Interesting language here, and quite almost ambiguous in terms of what's being suggested. From men in cars after girl children, there's quite an ominous feel. Maybe there is that sort of encroaching adulthood that's due to come to the way of the 9-year-old self. But also, I mean, for me personally, I felt that there was a sense of, this is obviously something she's been told by an adult, that maybe then she's scared of, but it's not necessarily her own fear, but a fear that's been passed on to her from another adult, from someone maybe who cares for her. The next stanza then, and again we've got enjambment here in this poem now, where we've got this running on to the next line, or to lunge out over the water. So we've gone from a fear to another fear, but it's a different type of fear, because this is one that she kind of throws herself into. To lunge out, so again coming back to that kind of carelessness and exuberance of youth, to lunge out over the water on a rope that swings from a tree. It's very dynamic verbs, that contrasts with the adjectives earlier when she was describing the kind of harms and hurts that she's experienced now as a grown-up. Long buried in housing, so there's a sense of urbanisation as well that's killed off that childhood that she was a part of, that she had, those freedoms that she had as a child, and obviously that may be suggesting that she can't go back to her youth. She can't go back to that area where that rope swing was, because actually there's houses there now, and it's not the same. Long buried in housing, and buried, suggesting maybe a death. That urbanisation has killed off that childhood, like adulthood and maturity has killed off her youth. But no, I shan't cloud your morning. So maybe that foreshadowing of the future, as I mentioned there. She knows things are going to change, but she doesn't want to cloud that idea and that feeling of sort of freedom and energy for that child. Sense of maybe as well as losing the moment here as well, and losing that sort of that childhood carelessness, really. I have fears, enough for both of us. So again, there's a sort of division in the use of the personal pronouns there. That maturity as well through the emotive fears, so less carefree as well. Constant switch, like I've said, between those pronouns, that personal to collective, where she's maybe sometimes bringing herself closer to the speaker, the listener, sorry, and then at other times kind of distancing herself from her younger self. I leave you, so again her actions here, just maybe like she's left her younger self behind as she's grown older. I leave you in an ecstasy of concentration, slowly peeling a ripe scab from your knee. Maybe they're symbolising the sort of dangers of youth, that sort of ripe scab, and how maybe as children we're sort of fascinated by that danger and those sort of things that scare us, whereas in adulthood we're not. To taste it on your tongue. So metaphor, maybe that urge to taste danger when you're young. So it could be metaphorically suggesting that. Okay, so some notes then that I have gone over just broadly about the poem before I dive into the themes. So both a celebration maybe of childhood there, and that sort of lamentation over its loss. There's almost a regret for that sort of feeling of carefreeness and that excitement and exuberance of youth. Draws attention to the differences between youth and adulthood. So there's antithesis, as I said, we can see the adjectives bad and bruised that are used to describe her back and her foot. And they are sort of in stark contrast then to the lunging out of the water and running and climbing and leaping. So there's antithesis there, I suppose, between the old and sort of young. Explores the idea that our identity changes as well as we develop, as we grow. The narrator has little in common then with her sort of 9-year-old self. So she feels very different. And it actually has so little in common that she can't even sort of see herself being friends with the child that she once was. And it sort of raises some very interesting questions then about identity and, what makes us us. Maybe it is experience and time that changes our identity. And then others might argue that there are some core things that don't change as we grow. But clearly in this poem there is very much a focus on what does change and what does sort of develop as we grow up, and what distances us, I suppose, from those sort of childhood ideals and behaviours that we have. So we'll have a little look then at themes, and again, like I said, it might be worth colour coding any quotes then that you can see that link to these key themes. Alright, so the key themes then that are explored in this poem are obviously childhood. As previously stated, this theme is often explored in literature. Our formative years have so much influence on us that they very much impact who we become as adults. It's interesting though that in this poem she doesn't feel that there is any connection between her as a child and her as an adult, even though she does consistently use those collective pronouns we when she's referring to her and her younger self. But it almost suggests that she doesn't see a link between the person that she was and then the person that she is now. past and present, so there are often a contrast between these themes when explored in literature, and there's definitely a difference here in her past where she's quite energetic and full of life and risk-taking, whereas as an adult now she's full of fears. Joy and innocence, so these themes are often linked with childhood and past and present themes. These are feelings that are often lost with the passing of time, and again we definitely get that sense in this poem. As a child she does seem to have this joy and excitement about life, where she's just sort of throwing herself into situations, whereas as an adult she seems very much to be cautious and more distancing herself from those types of behaviour in her childhood self. Memories, so explored in literature very often, memories form an important link to our past, and here she does definitely explore some memories, some of which are ambiguous to us as the observer almost, where we almost feel as though as the reader we're being quite intrusive when she talks about, for example, her dream, that we then don't know what that might be, but clearly it's shared between her and the younger self that she is speaking to. Youth and age, so these themes are referred to throughout literature. There is a contrast between these two states, that it often creates conflict or tension between the two, and we definitely get a sense of that in this poem, where we have this kind of excitable child that's very distracted and very much full of energy, linked to this older self then that seems very wary and very sort of hesitant to put herself in those situations, from what she says about having lots of fears. So again, as I've done before, you've got their bibliography of links to sites that will help to help you sort of form your opinion. That helped me. But again, I hope that was really helpful, and as always, if you need any help with anything, please do drop me an email or send me a little link in our Google Classroom, and I will see you next lesson.